Hi everyone, it's Andy from Adaptronic here, and I'm just making this video while it's fresh in my mind. It's about one technique I've developed for tuning very twitchy engines. I first noticed the problem when I was driving a bridge-ported rotary that one of my friends had. He'd just bought it, had a Microtech on it I think, and he said, just take it for a drive, Andy. I took it for a drive. I found it very difficult to drive because it really wanted to idle very high. I think it was about 1600 RPM or something like that. And between about 1600 and 2500, the torque on the engine increased quite a lot. So this made it very difficult to drive. It was very jerky, very on-off. And especially since that's the engine speed that you're generally doing when you're driving along the road. So, I mean, at that time I just thought, oh, it's a Bridgeport, that's what it's going to do, that's what you expect. Then a few weeks ago, a tuner gave me a call and said, I've got this problem with the car. It feels very jerky around the sort of low RPM, sort of 1000 to 2000 RPM range. And I said, okay, well, what's strange about it that would make it do that? And he said, well, it's got bigger cams in it than factory, although they're not huge cams. I'm not sure if that's relevant or not. And I said, well, are the mixtures good on the engine? Is the air-fuel ratio consistent? He said, yeah, it is. I said, well, it sounds like the engine's just got a big change in the torque around that point. It's going to oscillate forward and back. And that's really an artifact of the cams. And if the tune's good, then I can't really see anything else that we can do about it. But as it happened, I got an opportunity to look at the car myself, and I discovered that the map at idle was about 60 kPa, whereas this is an MX-5, and a factory MX-5, they're about 30 kPa or something like that, maybe a bit more. So 60 is it's actually a fairly decent sized cam. Either that or the cam timing was wrong, so there was heaps of overlap. But regardless, looking at the fuel map, I could see a big jump between 1000 to 1500 to 2000 RPM. So this indicates that the cam's starting to work around that RPM, if that makes sense. That's the phrase that people use. What it means is that the volumetric efficiency of the engine is increasing very quickly over that range. So I basically did two things to smooth out, because I drove it and it was actually really jerky. So if you're trying to drive in the car park or something, it would have been very difficult. So I did two things to correct this. The first thing that I did was I changed the tuning resolution to 250 RPM instead of 500. At the moment, the software doesn't allow you to just change the map spacing and have it automatically readjust all the values in the map. It just changes the axes. But between 500 and 250, because 500 is 2 times 250, you can just grab each column, move it up to the new column for that point, and then interpolate in between the two. So that's what I did on this car, and I discovered that because of the VE change between about 1000 and about 2000 was very steep, having the extra map points there helped a lot with getting the tune more accurate on the fuel map. But the other thing that I did was actually put a ramp in the ignition map. And the reason for this is to basically undo what the cam's doing. So as the engine speed increases, the torque increases very quickly, which is what gives the jerky behaviour. So what I've done instead is I've reduced ignition timing from that point to that point, which means that the increase in torque is not nearly as drastic. And above that point, I've brought the ignition timing back in again. Now, there are a couple of downsides with this, so you need to be careful about how you apply it. First of all, you can't just bring all the ignition timing back in the space of 250 RPM, because that'll create another jerky situation around that point. So you need to bring it back in gradually, and you also need to be aware that because the ignition timing is so retarded there, we have to watch our exhaust gas temperatures, and also it won't be all that good for fuel economy if you're cruising around that point. Now, I've tried to only do this at the light load points, and still have a normal amount of ignition timing at the high load points. This engine seemed to be knocking a bit, so I've taken timing out anyway. But this actually made the car, quite reasonable to drive. So it's a big step up on where it was before. I haven't seen any other tuners do this before, and maybe it's a common practice and people do it all the time. Maybe it's kept a trade secret. I don't know. I've never seen it done, except to help smooth out idle. But I thought that if I put this video together and explain it to people, then if someone has a similar problem, then they'll be able to apply it as well. For more information, please go to adaptronicecu.com.